I took a thick, greasy link of smoked Kielbasa sausage straight from the deli section of my local grocery store and placed it on top of my weathered white cooler. Under the punishing heat of the midday sun, I used a pocket knife to slice off a heavy 2-inch chunk. I did not immediately put it on a hook. I stepped back and let that dense cured meat sit in the direct sunlight for 20 minutes. I watched as the heat began to draw out the thick animal fats until the entire piece of sausage was sweating a heavy layer of seasoned oil. I pushed a massive circle hook directly through the tough outer casing of that sweating meat and hurled it into the dark, turbulent current of a swollen river. To prove exactly what was about to happen, I ran a simultaneous test. On a second rod, I rigged a highly expensive commercially manufactured blood bait, specifically designed for catfish. I dropped both baits into the exact same raging current. In less than 5 minutes, the expensive commercial paste completely dissolved and washed away into nothing, leaving a bare hook sitting uselessly in the mud. The Kielbasa, however, remained absolutely intact, anchored to the bottom like a rock. 42 minutes later, my heavy fiberglass rod bowed so violently toward the water that the fiberglass nearly cracked. A massive catfish had tracked an invisible chemical highway through zero-visibility water and inhaled that piece of grocery store sausage. If you walk into any major sporting goods retailer today and browse the catfish aisle, you will be confronted by a massive wall of specialized attractants. You will see shelves stacked with imported stink baits, complex punch baits, and specialized dip tubes. The corporations behind these products charge premium prices for tubs of coagulated cheese, synthetic blood compounds, and artificial thickeners. The glossy packaging guarantees a massive, unavoidable scent cloud that will draw fish from miles away. But what the corporate chemists intentionally hide behind those bright labels is a deliberate mechanical flaw engineered purely for planned obsolescence. It is a phenomenon known in fluid dynamics as rapid hydrodynamic washout. When you drop a commercial dip bait or a soft synthetic paste into a fast-moving river, the sheer hydraulic force of the current begins to immediately strip the soft material from your hook. Within 10 to 15 minutes, the proprietary sludge dissolves entirely into the water column. You reel up an empty, bare piece of steel. You are forced to reach your hand back into that expensive tub, apply more bait, and cast again. The industry did not design a product to establish a permanent feeding zone. They designed a fast-dissolving consumable product that guarantees you will empty the container quickly and return to the store to buy more. You are paying top dollar to temporarily perfume the river while your hook sits empty in the darkness. Smoked Polish sausage operates on an entirely different level of biological permanence and fluid dynamics. To understand why this cheap deli item systematically outfishes premium tackle, you have to dissect its specific chemical matrix and the ancient process of curing meat. A standard link of Kielbasa is incredibly dense. It is constructed from coarsely ground pork beef, heavy animal fat, and a very specific blend of garlic smoke and spices. But the most critical component in its formulation is the massive concentration of sodium chloride. The salt used to cure and preserve the meat creates a biological weapon when introduced to a freshwater environment. When you throw a chunk of heavily salted processed meat into the river, an unstoppable reaction begins based on the laws of osmotic pressure. The fresh river water naturally attempts to invade the cellular structure of the salty meat cube to balance the salinity. As the water pushes into the meat, this osmotic pressure rhythmically forces the trapped oils, amino acids, and garlic compounds out into the environment in a slow, controlled release. It acts as an underwater chemical pump that never stops working. But the true genius of this bait lies in the physical properties of the pork fat. The heavy animal lipids inside the sausage are highly hydrophobic, meaning they naturally resist immediate dissolution in water. When the osmotic pressure pushes these fats out of the meat, they do not instantly wash away and dilute like a synthetic water-based gel. Instead, they form microscopic droplets of pure animal oil. Because these oils are slightly lighter than the water, but continuously pushed down by the heavy river current, they create an incredibly dense, sustained lipid corridor. The heavy oil droplets rise slightly and drift horizontally with the current, creating a miles-long olfactory highway that hugs the river bottom. You are not creating a brief cloud of scent that vanishes in minutes. You are establishing a permanent, thick physical trail of calories that cuts straight through the darkest and muddiest water imaginable. To a massive bottom-feeding predator like a blue catfish or a flathead catfish, this thick lipid trail is not just a passing smell. It is a metabolic necessity. These apex predators hunt in deep, muddy environments where the penetration of light is completely non-existent. They do not use their eyes to find prey. Relying on visual cues in dark, turbid water would mean starvation. Instead, evolution has equipped them with one of the most terrifyingly efficient chemosensory systems on the planet. A catfish is essentially a giant free-swimming tongue. Their entire bodies, from their long barbels to their flanks and all the way down to their tail fins, are covered in over 175,000 independent taste receptors. They are constantly obsessively tasting the chemical composition of the water column. They do not just smell food, they track the chemical gradient, reading the microscopic changes in the concentration of amino acids and animal fats suspended in the current. When a monster catfish lurking hundreds of yards downstream detects these pure animal fats drifting in the current, its central nervous system locks onto the gradient. The garlic and spices embedded in the sausage fat act as a biological multiplier, triggering a violent, aggressive reaction. The fish does not consciously decide to swim toward your location. Its nervous system is hijacked by chemotaxis, forcing an involuntary motor response. The fish is compelled to swim against the current, following the thickening trail of amino acids and hydrophobic lipids directly to the highest point of concentration. And when it finally reaches the source of that overpowering smell, it does not find a diluted puddle of synthetic paste that has washed off a hook. Because of the tough casing and the dense cured meat of the Kielbasa, the fish finds a solid, highly caloric piece of protein that has survived the heavy river current. It finds an actual meal. Without hesitation, the predator opens its massive jaws and inhales the solid meat, resulting in an aggressive, violent hook set. The application of this method requires a very specific preparation phase before the bait ever touches the water. You cannot simply open the package, cut a piece of cold sausage and throw it on a hook. That is the critical mistake that amateurs make. If you use it straight out of the refrigerator, the fat inside the meat is congealed, and the casing is relatively soft. Small nuisance fish will peck at it, and the cold river water will lock the oils inside the meat. The secret to weaponizing this bait lies in altering its thermodynamics on the bank of the river. You must slice the sausage into thick rounds and lay them out on top of your cooler under the blazing sun. As the intense ultraviolet heat penetrates the meat, a critical physical transformation occurs. The heat pre-melts the internal animal fat, drawing the heavy pork oils to the surface, where they form a slick, glistening film. Simultaneously, the exposure to the open air causes the exterior casing of the sausage to undergo severe desiccation. The outside dries out, forming a tough, highly elastic, leathery crust around the meat. This sun-baked crust is the perfect mechanical armor. It shields the bait from the aggressive river current and stops small bait fish from tearing it apart. Meanwhile, the center remains soft and loaded with liquefied fats, ready to pump out an intense scent trail the moment it hits the water via that osmotic pressure we talked about. You thread this sun-baked armor-plated calorie bomb onto a heavy circle hook, leaving the point completely exposed, and you cast it into the deepest, darkest current you can find. The sheer biological effectiveness of this cheap grocery store bait is not a myth. It is an ecological reality so powerful that it fundamentally disrupts the modern tackle industry narrative. The corporations want you to remain entirely dependent on their supply chain. They want you buying scents that wash off in the current plastics that lose their effectiveness after a single strike, and proprietary rigs that cost a fortune to replace. But the raw physics of the water and the neurobiology of the fish do not respond to price tags or glossy magazine advertisements. They respond to osmotic pressure, lipid dispersion, and concentrated amino acids. Generations of river fishermen knew this long before the internet existed. They fed their families during the hardest economic times, using the scraps from the butcher block. They understood the language of the river. We are building an uncompromising community of anglers who refuse to be manipulated by corporate marketing. We rely on the raw physics of water-forgotten biological triggers and the artisanal survival tackle that our grandfathers used. If you are ready to stop funding the tackle industry quarterly earnings and start mastering the actual science of predatory fish, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. We are taking the power back from the corporations one cast at a time, and we are exposing the suppressed methods they hope you never discover. The knowledge we share here is the absolute foundation of this resistance, and I want to hear directly from you. The real-world field tests that you conduct are what drive our next investigations. I want you to go down to the comments right now and tell me what is the absolute strangest, cheapest, or most bizarre grocery store meat or pantry item you have ever put on a hook. Did the fish completely ignore it, or did it trigger an unexpected feeding frenzy in the water? Drop your story below because I read every single one of them, and your experiences often prove exactly what the scientific data suggests. When you are standing on the muddy bank of a raging river, looking at a current that threatens to wash away everything you throw into it, you have a choice. You can trust the expensive plastic tub of commercial paste that the sponsored tournament professionals tell you to buy, knowing that it will melt away in the darkness and leave you constantly rebaiting an empty hook. Or you can walk into your local grocery store, spend a few dollars on a heavy smoked sausage, let the sun transform it into an armored chemical scent engine, and drop it into the abyss. You will be utilizing the raw principles of osmotic pressure and hydrophobic lipid dispersion to create a permanent pathway of calories that apex predators are biologically forced to follow. Stop letting the industry sell you temporary perfumes. Start using the permanent biology of cured meat. Keep your hooks sharp, trust the raw chemistry of the water, and I will see you out there.